Blog Talk Radio.
Hello everyone, this is Laurie Smith on Blog Talk Radio. It is Friday morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, April the 2nd, and I'm happy to be here. This is One Child Abuse Survivor to Another. It's bright and early. I have the day off today, but I figured, well, I'll get up and do the show anyway. I have a lot to do today, so I thought instead of just sleeping in and being lazy, I'd just get up and do the show and then get started with my day. So I'm happy to be here, and we're continuing on with crisis, understanding crisis. This is when an article I found on Child Welfare Information Gateway at www.childwelfare.gov. And Blog Talk Radio has installed some automatic ads on the system that just play whenever they want. So if this is still streaming, if you can hear the ad for this dishwashing machine thing, when I'm done, I'm going to, I think I'm going to stop my Blog Talk service because I don't agree with it at all. It's like interrupting my show. And actually what it is, it's causing me to be able to not hear what I'm talking, because I can't hear because I've got two ads going into the speakers. So I don't know, what a bummer. But anyway, so we'll continue on here. And we're looking at crisis intervention assessment today. And I wanted to continue on with this. And yesterday we finished up an article, special family considerations. And now today, crisis intervention assessment. And I'll just start with the introduction. And you can pull this article up too and read through it. And you can find it. It's on the Child Welfare Information Gateway. You have to go in and search for these publications alphabetically. They're under the letters that they start with. So I actually found this one under C. So you can go to that website if you want to and pull this up, and you can get the article yourself just by going under the letter C, pulling it up and reading it for yourself. It's called Understanding Crisis, and also Crisis Intervention Assessment is just part of that actual publication. It's quite a large publication, actually, and there's a lot to it. I only pulled off so much of it because it's when CPS goes into the home because there has been reports of abuse. There's a best case scenario, where they'd like to see the family stay together. They'd like to involve all the family members to get help, to learn how to problem solve, and to learn, how to cope and not abuse their children. And if there's domestic violence within the home, then they try to stop that as well. And that way, there's no, it doesn't escalate further and more abuse towards the children. So, and towards, the parents as far as domestic violence goes. So it's really a great article, and I think, it's important because so many people, hear stories about CPS going into homes and just the first thing they do is take the children, and that's just not the case. Actually, in our case, I think they should have. They intervened when I was young. I was quite young, and my older siblings would definitely know more about it, but they're all gone. They're all passed on, and so it's terrible because there's nobody really to ask what happened. And so my sister, she remembers a little bit of it, but she was young too, and so she only remembers bits and pieces of it. And she remembers going to a few counseling sessions, and even my parents said that they did go to 2 counseling sessions. I remember years ago they were talking about it, and then they moved out of the country. We sort of slipped out from under the eye of the CPS or whichever Child Protection Services went in when the abuse was reported. And so I just think it's so important to take a look at this because they don't usually remove the children unless there's no other alternative. But I kind of think that they should do a little bit more of it myself. They left us in the home, and there was seven children. There was only 5 living at home at the time. 2 had moved out, but 5 kids in the home experiencing abuse on a daily level, on all kinds of levels, and on a daily basis. Really unfortunate because it ruined our families' lives, and it ruined every single member's family's, life, really. I wish they would have removed us, so it's really unfortunate. When I got older, I didn't want to be removed from the home because no one else had been removed from the home, and my mom was actually threatening to throw me out anyway. She didn't want me around the house, and she actually didn't want me there, period. And I thought, no, she didn't throw out any of the other kids, so I thought, no way, I'm not going, So I could have actually had an opportunity to get Child Protection Services and the police involved, and I decided I didn't want to because I didn't want to be the only one thrown out of the home, because that's what would have happened. So because my sister was quite a bit older than me, and she was the only one besides, well, my brother was kind of still living at home, but he was there sometimes and sometimes he wasn't. So really nobody else would have been removed from the home but me. So I thought, no way, I'm not going to be the only child to be thrown out. So that's what happened there, and that can happen in families, and it's horrible. Absolutely horrible. I got the music to finally stop playing on those ads, but I'm going to check it out when I play it back and see if that was interrupting the show or not, because that was pretty obnoxious. I couldn't even hear I couldn't hear what I was saying because there was two different ads talking at the same time. It's kind of crazy. So we're going to look here at the introduction to this part, Crisis Intervention Assessment. And we're on for 30 minutes. It's not a professional show. I don't hold any professional counseling certificates or therapist certificates. It's not meant to replace professional help. And, I'm just a person who sits on Blog Talk Radio just bringing information out to people because I really feel that we all need to start talking about child abuse. I just wanted to be one more voice out there. I know there's a lot of voices out there. I'm starting to see this as I study along and move forward in studying for child rights, human rights. And I'm starting to see that there's so much, actually there is a lot of people talking about it, but it's not mainstream. It's all on these side social networks, which is great to see because it's better than nothing. We really need this to be on the mainstream TV. It needs to be on the mainstream radio. It needs to be in the newspapers. It needs to be everywhere if we're ever going to really make a difference and really make a dent in this issue of child abuse and the issues surrounding it, which is poverty and lack of education, crisis parents going through crisis, parents who just can't cope, mental issues, drug addiction. Communities are really going to have to start taking a look. We're going to have to fix the community as a whole if we're ever going to fix the family. You know what I mean? Because family units usually, like my parents didn't start out when they got married saying, well, we're just going to get married and we'll just ruin a bunch of kids' lives. That's what we're going to do. It'll be great. I know they didn't start out that way. No one does. I don't think anybody sets out to do that. There's a lot of issues that go with child abuse, which is, like I said, it can be passed on generation to generation, like a cycle of abuse, which in my mom's case, that was the case. There was a lot of emotional issues, a lot of emotional problems, a lot of mental problems, and it's unfortunate. I grew up with kids whose parents had drug problems, and they just couldn't cope, and alcohol problems and things like that. So parents don't start out just saying, oh, great, let's just abuse our children. I know they don't. And the sad thing is they end up abusing their children, and it ruins their children's lives. And then, even if they don't get caught, it ruins that family's life, So whole communities are basically built on abused people. It's really got to stop because, I don't have the statistics in front of me, but like 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 6 boys are abused, and so you take a crowd of 100 people, 1 to 30 of those. Let's see, how does that work? It's too early in the morning for me to try to do the calculation. Sorry about that. But anyway, 30, 1 in 3. That's 30%. No, that's actually, what is that? That's 30. Not oh well, forget it. That's okay. Can't think this morning. We have a huge epidemic on our hands is really what I'm trying to get at. And so when you see a crowd, if there's 10 people in a room, that a portion of those, whether they're men or women, have been abused as a child in one way or another. So that's just horrible, and it really needs to stop. And so that's why I believe that we all need to get involved, and every single person, even if you weren't abused as a child, has to stand up for people who have been, and also for children who are being abused. We all have to get involved, and even if you don't have children, see, I don't have children, not by choice, it just didn't happen. And it's probably a good thing because it took me until my 40s to get straightened around as far as my adult survivor issues went. It took me to the age of 40, to really get a handle on my own issues with just depression and feeling so lost, and I never really reached out to get any help, and I don't know if I would have, gone on to abuse my own children. I certainly would hope not, but, there's always the possibility, because I didn't reach out and get that help, that I might have continued on the cycle. Now I can actually say no, I probably wouldn't, because because of the healing I've done in the last 3 years. But it could happen. People do that, and it's not their fault. But not every single person who was abused goes on to abuse their child, and that's a fact. They've done studies, and they found that most people who were abused treat their children very well, because they know what it's like to suffer as a child, and they don't want to pass that on to their children. But they can pass on, sort of like depression, and if they haven't got their symptoms sort of fixed, as far as going to a therapist or counselor or group support or something, they might have some depression and sadness in their lives, and towards the issue, right? So the children are definitely would be affected by it. If it's affecting you, it affects your children. That's what happened in our case. What was affecting our parents was definitely affecting us, and they were just lashing out because they were hurting so bad, So that's the whole issue. It's just so important that we take a look at all this stuff and just become educated and aware, and promote awareness, education, and prevention of child abuse. So we're on for about another 18 minutes, and I'll get started here. But that got me off to an off start, because that music was on there bothering me for about the first few minutes, first 5 to 7 minutes. So sorry about that. Kind of got me sort of thinking in a different way, sort of set me off here, because I just woke up. So, and also, this, if you're under the age of 18, you want to have an adult listen to any of your stuff that you're doing online. Child online safety, online protection for children is such a huge issue. I fight for child rights. I stand up for child rights, and you would be doing yourself a favor if you get someone to listen to the show with you, an adult or a somebody in your life, a teacher, a counselor. Someone in your life who you trust and who has a good head on their shoulders. They can help you, but you listen to the show with you and see if it's something that you should be listening to. It's so important, because I don't know where the players are now. I don't know how many young people are listening. And so, you want to make sure that you're safe online no matter what you're doing, because there's all kinds of crazy predators trying to get a hold of children, online predators, and they will do all kinds of things to get a hold of you. So you need to become educated about what's going on, what is actually really going on out there, and because there's a lot of sick people out there, and they are looking for children, and so you need to be very safe when you're online. You need to be very safe everywhere you go, really, but you want to make sure that you're safe. So have an adult or someone kind of check this out before you start listening to it, just to make sure it's something that you should be listening to. I really think it's important, and everything that you're doing online, very important. And there's all kinds of information about that online child safety and things like that, child protection, online protection. Just make sure that you are very safe, and you know who you're talking to, and you know what you're listening to when you're online. Okay, because I fight for child rights. It's so important. We have to stand up for children, right? So, introduction to this crisis intervention assessment says different personalities of individuals, the divergent environments in which they reside, the variety of psychological and biological makeups, and the varying family structures in which they live lead to a broad range of responses to stress. Consequently, it becomes difficult to predict human behavior. Yet it is necessary to make an attempt to assess the risk of abuse within families in order to protect family members. People in crisis need and are more responsive to immediate intervention. And it says here, rapport necessary for family assessment is more readily established by offering immediate emotional first aid and support when the family is frightened, confused, and experiencing emotional pain. It says, a case of father-daughter incest, for instance, this is what they've written here, illustrates the stages of crisis intervention. The multidisciplinary team learns that a hazardous event occurred when the father lost his job and received criticism from his wife. He felt or perceived himself to be in a vulnerable state, with the family not respecting him. He turned to a child in the family who seemed most understanding and least likely to reject him. Sexualizing his needs and feelings for the child, he misused his power by sexually fondling the child. This is a precipitating factor, who in turn told a friend, that's the hazardous event, who told a school authority. The case was reported, that's a vulnerable state, and followed by an investigation, which is another precipitating factor, and by this time the family was in an active state of crisis. Note that there can be several cumulative precipitating factors and successive crises in one family. In no way does this imply that sex abusers are not fully responsible for their perpetration. So this is just sort of an example of what can happen in a family, and just one example, and they just kind of show to show the precipitating factors, the vulnerable state, the crisis, how it sort of takes place and becomes a crisis, but they're not saying that it's right, and that, all abusers are fully responsible for what they do. Total family involvement, I'll just keep reading here. Since families are systems, what affects one member of a family affects other members. Considering this dynamic interactional pattern, it makes sense to involve the entire family in crisis intervention assessment. This is especially true in child abuse and neglect cases where the interactional pattern is dysfunctional and change is critical to protecting the child. Even in incest cases or illegal drug sales in which the offender is removed, but reunification may occur, intervention is done with remaining family members, but coordinated with professionals who are treating the offender. And that's just the whole issue, right? I think, if it weren't for these groups that go into these homes, of course, it's not a perfect situation. And they don't always make the right decisions, like in our case. I seriously think they should have removed us from the home until my parents went and got the counseling. And then as soon as they had proven that they went to some counseling, we could have all been brought back, and we would have and we could have had counseling, and then everybody would have had hopefully a great life together, right? But unfortunately, it didn't happen, and so I seriously, I'm not against this kind of thing. I would have really preferred to see my family alive and well today than completely destroyed, right? So it says, for an intervention to be most effective, all family members require both individual and group attention. Each member needs to feel special and separate, yet an integral part of the family group. Individual and family value orientations, communication styles, and roles must be understood. It takes hours of listening for the crisis worker to understand implicit family rules and beliefs, how messages are communicated and received, and who relates to who and how within the family. It says all family members need the opportunity to give their opinions about the family's primary problems. Different opinions help the crisis worker to get a picture of the antecedents to the crisis. The involvement of the total family may facilitate the following intervention. It says, when family crisis intervention is implemented, the specific steps that follow, similar to the generic stages of individual or group crisis counseling, should be taken. Appropriate efforts should be made to involve family members in each phase, which are to 1, search for the precipitating event and its perpetual meaning to the family members, 2, look for the coping means used by the family and appraise the extent to which these have or have not been successful. Number 3, search for alternative ways of coping and the resources that might improve the situation, while actively soliciting suggestions from family members. 4, review and support the family members' efforts to cope in new ways with evaluation of results in terms of day-to-day living experiences. And number 5, move toward early termination that was planned to the initial contract with the family. And number 6, plan and conduct at least one follow-up booster shot session. Throughout this process, the crisis worker should actively define the goals of the family crisis session and the means that can be used for goal achievement, while energetically focusing on the relevant issues. So it seems to me if there's abuse going on in a home and it's serious, they should remove the children. Why would you just think that a parent's going to be on the up and up and just not remove the child? I know a lot of people complain because they say, they shouldn't take the children out of the home, But the thing is, there has to be something wrong in order for the children to be taken out of the home. It seems they end up leaving a lot of children in the home when I believe that they shouldn't. Because, people say, well, where would these children go then? Well, hopefully not onto a worse situation. But you know what I mean? Parents have a way of manipulating. And especially abusers, abusive parents, right? They're obviously good at what they do. They've been able to get away with it. And so it seems to me, if there's, to me it just seems like if there's a report of abuse and the CPS goes in and there's bruises and the family members are upset, or even if it's just one child and there's no other children but just one child, and there's physical evidence, there's marital problems, or if it's a single parent and they can't cope and stuff, well, I know, where are we going to put all these kids, right? We'd have to take away almost all the kids out of people's homes because people are so sick and twisted with what they do to their children. I've seen it firsthand, and I know, you know what I mean? I know what people are doing to their children, and it's really pathetic, and it needs to stop. Everybody needs to stop taking their problems out on their children. And if you can't provide a good home for your child, well, then get them to a place that can. You know what I mean? Children are not brought into the world to misuse and mistreat, and then to be turned into abusers themselves, like child predators and stuff when they get older, because they can't cope with the fact that they were abused. You know, this breaks my heart. It really does, because so many people are like, oh no, I don't want to call and report abuse. I might break up a happy home. Well, you know, abused children are not happy. They don't necessarily want to be taken away from their parents either, because there's that whole parental bond thing. Even if your parents are mistreating you, a lot of times you think, well, at least I know what it's like here in this house, but I don't know what it'll be like somewhere else. And so a lot of times kids will want to stay in the home. That's kind of was my case too, because I wasn't sure if I did get removed from the home, if the situation would just be worse somewhere else. And so, you know, but that doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it right at all. Parents have to become responsible for their actions towards their children. I seriously think there should be some huge, if CPS has to go into a home, there should be some really huge, stiff kind of penalties. And if certain things are not met, that they will lose their children. And I don't think they should just be allowed to we'll just do some counseling sessions and then whatever. You know, they should have to meet certain things before they're allowed to even think about keeping their children. And if they can't meet those things, it means that they are not able to look after their children because they can't cope, or maybe they have mental problems or mental issues. And then, you know, we really have to, like, if I could open up my home to children, I would. But I don't have the finances or the resources to do that. You know what I mean? I mean, it's just unfortunate. It really is. Kids shouldn't have to be removed from their home. Parents should stop abusing their children. I mean, period. Today, as you can tell, I'm just a little bit upset. It just bothers me because all of this crap is going on because parents are abusing their children, and caregivers and sexual predators are, you know, getting a hold of children, and other crazy people in the family who just think it's okay to do what they do to children. And if it doesn't make you mad, then there's something wrong. You know what I mean? If it doesn't bother you, if it doesn't get in and under your skin and make you angry about the situation, there's something wrong, because this is wrong. Child abuse is wrong. There's absolutely nothing right about it. And anybody who thinks it's funny, I just wish you could be in an abused child's shoes. I really do. And I think, you know, karma has a way of working itself around. You know, we have to really work hard to make this whole situation change for children. But it really starts with parents, and it starts with me, and it starts with you. You know what I mean? We have to change the way that we treat people, period. And, you know, parents need to think about what they're doing before they lash out at their children or use them for their own controlling issues and sexual issues. You know what I mean? They really need to think about what they're doing before they beat on them and torture them. Because if you're doing that to a child, then you're sick, right? So, I mean, obviously, CPS is not doing a good enough job as far as I'm concerned, and neither is the government and the lawmakers. We all have to stand up and say, look, kids are falling through the cracks. You know, CPS and all these other child protection services were called in, but the child remained in the home, and then they were killed. You know, we see these reports in the paper every day. I don't know how many reports we see in the paper. I haven't counted them up, but I mean, it's a lot. And this is coming across from the, you know, online social networking and stuff of all the reports and all the cases of convicted child abuse, you know, parents who killed their children. And whether it's one parent or both involved, right? It's usually just one, but there had to be two. And if there wasn't two, then somebody else in the family should have stepped in and, you know, taken a look at the situation. We really have to stand up for children. They have no one to stand up for them. And CPS and DHS, you know, I have nothing against them. I think it's great. We have to have those groups in place, because who else is going to go in there and look after, you know, make sure that this is not happening to children? It's still not a perfect system, and it never will be. The problem being is more people just need to get involved. And I think that, you know, if you suspect abuse, report it. Absolutely report it. You know, if you even suspect it. because, you could save a child's life. And you want to be, aware of the signs and symptoms of child abuse, right? You want to know what to look for. If if you think someone is mistreating, if you see someone mistreating their child, whether it's verbal abuse, emotional abuse, psychological abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, you have to do the right thing for that child, because their blood is on your hands. If they die, it's not, it's your own conscience you're going to have to live with for the rest of your entire life, because you did not make the phone call. So it's so important that we do stand up and watch out for children. If you work with children, you need to be on the special lookout for kids, you know what I mean? Because you really have access to them on a daily basis. Teachers, nurses, other people, pediatricians, just people who work with children. Be on the lookout, you know what I mean? It's not a perfect world, and 1 out of 3 girls and 1 out of 6 boys are being abused. So, you better start looking at these poor kids, I know in my own case, there's no small children around me. There's no children, period, because I'm an adult. I don't live in an area where I live downtown, and there's not very many children around. But I'm still on the lookout. You better believe it, because I think it's so important. We have to stand up for these kids. We have to stand up, and we have to stop child abuse. Right? This is so sad and tragic and disgusting. I wouldn't have to be on doing this show if people would stop beating up their kids, stop sexually using their kids, and stop emotionally battering their children and verbally assaulting their children and causing their children a lot of pain. You know what I mean? Like this is just ridiculous that we have to sit here and do these shows because parents, like my parents, can't take the responsibility and get themselves some help because they're sick. You know what I mean? That's really pathetic. And then I have people telling me, oh, we loved your parents. Well, good for you. Good for you. It means your judgment is not very good. Your judgment call is not very good. So people like that I try to stay clear of, because if they could love someone who can abuse their children and abuse each other, then there's a real problem. If they would take the parent's side over the child's side, 7 children to be exact, and take the parent's side because the parents manipulated them to believe that they were just these wonderful people, there's a real problem. So take a look at who in your family is abusing their children, because it's happening. 1 in 3, 1 in 6. 1 in 3 girls, 1 in 6 boys. And take a good look at these people and see them for who they really are. You know what I mean? They're not, people who abuse children are not right in the head, first of all. You know what I mean? There's something wrong, because children were not put on the earth to be kicked around and mistreated and abused and verbally abused, emotionally abused, psychologically abused, and sexually abused. It's just ridiculous. It needs to stop. Take a look at the reports of the newspaper. That's my challenge for you this weekend. Take a look at all the reports online and anywhere where you can get a hold of news and see what's going on with child abuse issues and sexual exploitation and stuff like that. And this is just in North America, not let alone worldwide. Worldwide, it's just a horrific epidemic, because around the world they're actually allowed to kill their children, and there will be no penalties. There will be nobody stepping in for these children, or the wives, or the husbands actually do all the killing usually, or a family member. Sometimes it's a mother-in-law, but the thing is they're allowed to get away with it in other countries. But here in North America, we have rules and rights, and we have to stand up for those rights. I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, and I'm so happy to stand with them to fight child abuse. It's what I do 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I mean, I can't do it when I'm sleeping, but I make sure that I'm not sleeping all the time, because I want to get something done here. Check out their website, www.dreamcatchersforabusedchildren.com. You can get all the symptoms and the signs and symptoms. You can get a free PDF download on there. What to look for, the signs and symptoms of child abuse. It's called the Child Abuse Handbook. It's written by President and best-selling author Donna Shear, and the CEO and founder and author Sandra Dawn Potter have written together this Child Abuse Handbook. It's really awesome. Get that handbook, download it, it's free, and you can learn the signs and symptoms of all the different types of child abuse, and you can get some great information on how to report it, because there's proper ways to report child abuse, so that, if we don't report it properly, we could ruin the case for the child. They would end up staying in the home. And so it's so important to know how to do that, to know the proper steps to reporting child abuse and to recording it. If a child comes to you and says, hey, I'm being abused, you need to know how to report it. So important. So everybody, Take care. Have a great weekend. I'll be back on tomorrow and Sunday. You can check my schedule. I just thank you for tuning in. And sorry I was a little bit cranky here this morning, but it just makes me angry that we have to continue talking about child abuse just because parents will not and caregivers won't get themselves some help. You know what I mean? Because they're so sick that they can't even see that they need help. So that's sorry about that, but that just frustrates me to no end. Makes me very angry, and my heart is with you who survived and suffered through child abuse. And for all the children out there who are being abused right now, my heart is with them, and so are my prayers. And I just hope we can get to them in time and save them. And so everybody, take care and have a good day. Okay? Talk to you soon. Bye bye.